Assalamu alaikum. This is Brother Hameed back again with the Muslim Empowerment Institute. I hope you watched the video that came before this one. It's entitled, Welcome to Islam, the Whole Religion of Islam in 30 Minutes. Although it's very brief, it's very comprehensive, and that video outlines the beliefs and practices of Islam, and it has some explanation and some proofs for Islamic beliefs. This video, as well as the one that came before it, and inshallah, God willing, as well as future videos, is a humble attempt to fill a much needed void in the da'wah scene in America. Da'wah meaning invitation to Islam. Most of the people who are active in da'wah are not converts to Islam, and they're not even from America. Or if they are from America, their family originates from another country somewhere in the Muslim world, either Africa, Middle East, Southeast Asia, etc. Now, I'm not saying that their knowledge and efforts are not needed. May Allah bless them. But this work needs to be spearheaded by the indigenous people, and no, I don't mean Native Americans. I'm referring to the people who historically America, the West, has been their home. I can't necessarily go back to Africa, even though many of my ancestors came from there. But America is my home, and my Islam reflects my American experience. And I want to inform the countless people entering Islam in droves, specifically in America, that there are indigenous Muslim communities and movements in America. You have American Muslim scholars that converted to Islam, learned the deen, the religion, and are prominent in this country. So you shouldn't look to Islamic scholarship and religious authority in the Muslim world unless you live there. But you should be looking to the scholars and leadership from here in your own backyard. Now, Islamization is a process. You don't become Muslim yesterday and a week later you've gotten your prayers down and you're making them all on time. Right? And as far as things that are haram, things that are prohibited, you're not going to just give these things up right away. It doesn't usually happen that way. You're not going to just pop on the hijab the next day after taking shahada and keep it on forever. It took the Quran 23 years to be revealed. So while the Prophet Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, was in Mecca, the place of his birth, after the initial 13 years of the revelation, alcohol wasn't prohibited yet. So the Muslims were praying, but they were still getting drunk, because alcohol was not prohibited yet. And it didn't become prohibited until the Muslims made the migration to Medina in about the 3rd year after they had moved there due to them being persecuted while in Mecca. So for those who are new to Islam, this deen, this religion, is a marathon. It's not a sprint. However, be diligent with learning Islam. Now, after a person acknowledges that there is no God worthy of worship except Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger, in other words, they accepted Islam, the next thing you have to do is learn how to pray. So this video is targeting people who just accepted Islam, or for people who just never learned how to pray. And for this video, we'll be discussing the prerequisites of the prayer only. The prayer in Islam has a specific format. And some of these churches that I used to go to before Islam, they would wave their hands in the air like you just don't care. They would shout, scream, run, dance, and even pass out. This is not praying, and this is not worship. The prophets of God didn't pray like this. So the way that Muslims pray, by standing, bowing, prostrating, and sitting, this is how Prophet Muhammad prayed, and this is how the prophets prayed before him. If you look at the Bible, you'll see in Genesis chapter 17, Abraham fell upon his face and prayed. In Exodus chapter 34, Moses bowed his head and worshiped. In Matthew chapter 26, verse 39, Jesus fell on his face and prayed. If you look at some of the hieroglyphs in ancient Egypt, you'll find images of people praying, and they're bowing and prostrating just like Muslims do today. So this is the acceptable form of worship. Not screaming, not yelling, not dancing, and not passing out. People do this when they're possessed by the shaitan, the devil, right? Now, if you look up videos on how to pray in Islam on the internet or on YouTube, you see instructional videos that may be kind of confusing. Many of these videos are really not designed for new Muslims. They're mostly designed for children who are just learning how to pray. And those videos do not distinguish between the fara'id and the sunnah. So let me explain these terms. The fara'id is the part of the prayer or the part of the wudhu. The wudhu is the ritual washings of your limbs before you pray. It's the part of an act that if you were to leave it out, whether mistakenly or intentionally, the act will not be valid. And the sunnah are the extra acts of the prayer or the wudhu, which are considered to be rewardable or recommended, but if you leave them out, the act is still valid. For example, if you're making wudhu, it is not an obligation according to many of the schools of Islamic law, specifically the schools of Imam Malik and the school of Imam al-Shafi'i, that you rinse out your mouth and you sniff water up your nose and blow it out. That's considered to be part of the sunnah, the extra acts that Prophet Muhammad did. But if you leave those things out, your wudu is still valid. Why? Because Allah revealed in the Quran, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة فاغسلوا وجوهكم وأيديكم إلى المرافق وامسحوا برؤوسكم وأرجلكم إلى الكعبين. Which means, O you who believe, when you stand to pray, wash your faces and your arms to the elbows and wipe over your heads and wash your feet to the ankles. Notice what's missing here. Rinsing your mouth and sniffing water up your nose and blowing it out. So many of the scholars of Islam said that rinsing the mouth and sniffing water up the nose is just extra. It's rewardable, but if you leave it out, it's okay. Now if you forgot to wash your face and your arms, then that will make your wudu invalid. Why? Because washing your face and arms is a fara'id, which is an obligatory act, that if it is intentionally left out, the act would be invalid. So fara'id pertains to the obligatory and the sunnah pertains to the recommended. You need to master the fara'id first, and after you get that down, incorporate the sunnah if you want to. And we're going to go into the details about this in a moment. Now, before you pray, there are 5 preconditions that you have to fulfill. 5 things you have to do before you lift your hands up, make your intention, and say Allahu Akbar, God is the greatest. And this is not necessarily in any order. First, you have to make sure the prayer time is in. Muslims pray 5 times a day, and there are 5 preconditions that you have to do before you pray. And as far as the prayer times are concerned, you can download the prayer app. So you can go to your app store or your Google Play Store and download an app called Adhan. They spell it A-T-H-A-N, Adhan. You have prayer time frames for each one of the 5 prayers. And the prayer times vary depending on where you are on the planet. So for the prayer app, you need to put in the zip code for your current location. Now where I'm located, the second prayer of the day is in now. It's called the Dhuhr prayer, which some refer to as the noon prayer. The time frame for this prayer is as of today, it's 11:49 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. where I'm located. If you're in another city and state, a different time zone, your prayer time may be a little different. So I have between 11:49 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. to pray the Dhuhr prayer as of today. The prayer after that is called Asr, which some refer to as the mid-afternoon prayer. That's the 3rd prayer of the day. And I have from 2:30 p.m., which is when the Dhuhr prayer goes out, until 4:49 p.m. to pray the Asr prayer. Then the prayer after that is called the Maghrib prayer, which is the sunset prayer. It's the easiest prayer to know when it comes in because it's when the sun sets, when the sun goes below the horizon. And I have from 4:49 p.m., which is when the Asr prayer goes out, to 6:03 p.m. to pray the Maghrib prayer. Then the next prayer is the Isha prayer, and I have from 6:03 p.m., which is when the Maghrib prayer goes out to pray the Isha prayer all the way to the next day, which is like 5:35 a.m. to pray the Isha prayer. And when the Isha prayer goes out, then the Fajr prayer comes in. And you have until 5:35 a.m. to like 6:49 a.m. to pray the Fajr prayer. Then you have a long break between 6:49 a.m. until the beginning of the Dhuhr prayer, where no obligatory prayers are offered, and then it starts all back over. So just pay attention to your prayer app. So there are 5 daily prayers. The first one is called Fajr. The next prayer is called Dhuhr. The next one is called Asr. The next one is called Maghrib. And the last one is called Isha. There are other prayers that a person can make, but these are the only obligatory prayers. Each prayer has a certain number of cycles called rak'ah. So the Fajr prayer has 2 rak'ah. The Dhuhr prayer has 4 rak'ah. The Asr prayer has 4 rak'ah. The Maghrib prayer has 3 rak'ah. And the Isha prayer has 4 rak'ah. I hope that makes sense. The next precondition of the prayer is to ensure that your body, clothing, and place of prayer is free of what we call najasa. Najasa just means filth, and it consists of things that come from your front private part as well as your back private part. So that's urine, feces, blood, discharges, and it includes that from which comes up from the stomach, like vomit, not saliva, or something that comes from an infected wound like pus, or even things like alcohol and pork. There are a few other things that are kind of unlikely to occur, like unslaughtered animals getting on you. So before you pray, you have to make sure that your body, clothing, and place of prayer is free of najasa. That's urine, feces, blood, discharges, pus, vomit, pork, and alcohol. Anything that comes from the private part, if it's on your body, clothing, and place of prayer, that you can't pray until that najasa is removed. Now, non-Muslim men are accustomed to standing up when urinating. At least they are in America. This is problematic because you have to make sure that your body and clothing is free of najasa. And when you stand and urinate, you're soiling yourself with urine. So men and women must sit when urinating, or squat if it's a bathroom or toilet that's dirty. And men and women must make istinja after going to the bathroom. Istinja is using water to cleanse yourself after urinating or defecating to ensure all traces of najasa are removed from your body and after going to the bathroom. So in Muslim bathrooms, we always have some type of container of water that we either leave on the floor or on top of the toilet, like a water bottle or something like this. If water is not available, you can use toilet paper. Okay, but it's best to use water. Now I remember me and some brothers went to a ball game and I went to the bathroom, and of course I never used the urinals, but I went into a stall and there was najasa everywhere. I didn't want to step in it. And this is the reason why when we enter our homes, first thing we do is take off our shoes. You don't want to walk into your home, all of the urine, all the blood and feces, all the vomit that you stepped in all day to wound up on the floor in your home so your kids can crawl all over it, right? If you have your own place, you should take your shoes off and leave them at the door and ask others to do the same. When I have people that do work in my home, a plumber, pest control, whatnot, I ask them to nicely take off their shoes, and if they have some type of safety requirement, I got these shoe covers that they can put on over their shoes, and I get them back from them when they leave for reuse later. The next precondition before you pray is that you have to be in a state of wudhu. Now, what is wudhu and how do you make it? You just turn on your faucet or get water that you have in the container and wash your limbs in order for you to pray. Wudhu is what you have to do before you pray. Now again, this is just the bare minimum to make your wudhu valid. First, you make the intention to make wudhu by intending in your heart to make wudhu. You wash your face from your hairline to the bottom of your chin. You wash your arms up to and including your elbows, starting with your right arm, then your left arm. Then you wipe over your head with a wet hand. and you wash your feet up to and including the ankles. This is the bare minimum just to be valid, just for your wudu to be valid. Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, used a maximum of no more than 3 cups of water to make wudu. So you don't have to use a whole lot of water at all. Now, if you watch videos on this YouTube platform about wudu, you'll see it's kind of dragged out a bit. You know, they wash their face 3 times, wash their arms 3 times, so on and so forth. But this is the sunnah. And as I said earlier, this is the extra that I was referring to along with rinsing the mouth and nose. It's rewardable to do so, but it's not an integral for the validity of the wudu. Now, there are things that would occur that would break your wudu. And if your wudu is broken, you would have to repeat your wudu, not immediately, but before you pray again. And these are the following instances that would break your wudu: urinating or anything coming out of the private parts, having a bowel movement, having gas, touching the opposite sex with desire, a desire that would cause arousal, losing consciousness like sleeping or passing out, or touching the private parts with the bare hand like when cleansing oneself after using the bathroom. Now, there are 4 things that could occur that will make you have to do a shower from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet before you pray. And it's the following. At the end of the lady's menstrual cycle, when the lady's menstrual cycle ends, she has to take a full shower, including her hair, before she prays again. By the way, when women are on this cycle, they don't pray or fast. At the end of the postnatal bleeding, after a woman gives birth, she will have some type of postnatal bleeding that lasts for a few weeks. After the postnatal bleeding, she has to take a full shower before she prays. Next thing is sexual intercourse. After sexual intercourse, the parties involved have to take a full shower before they pray again. And the last thing is the emission of semen and the corresponding fluid from the woman in the event of a climax. If this occurs, you have to take a full shower just before you pray. One will make the intention to perform a ghusl, which is taking a shower, and wash from the top of the head to the bottom of the feet. Next, you have to make sure you're covered properly for the prayer. For men, you have to cover from your navel to your waist. For women, you have to cover all of your body except your face and your hands. And finally, you have to make sure you're facing the Qiblah. The Qiblah is the direction of the Kaaba in Mecca. In the U.S., we would face east, obviously. Most Muslims say the Qiblah is north of east. A few say it's south of east. And all the masjids on the earth are oriented to face the Qiblah. So to summarize, there are 5 preconditions or prerequisites that you have to do before you pray. You have to make sure that the prayer time is in. You have to make sure that your body, clothing, and place of prayer is free of najasa, which is filth. You have to make sure you're in a state of wudu. You have to make sure that you're covered properly for the prayer. And you have to make sure that you're facing the Qiblah, which is the direction of the Kaaba. This video was just for the prerequisites of the prayer, and inshallah, God willing, next time I'll get into the actual prayer itself. Feel free to leave questions, like, share, and subscribe. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.